So welcome to B2B Marketing Spotlight. I'm Lee Odden, CEO of TopRank Marketing, and today we have my good friend and a pure force of nature for all things marketing, Ann Handley. Ann is the world's first, not second or third, people. She is the first Chief Content Officer, a role that she pioneered at MarketingProfs. By the way, I think Ann is also the first Khaleesi of content, just so you know. And of course, MarketingProfs is a marketing training and education company with over 600,000 subscribers. And it's also the organization behind the upcoming B2B Forum that's happening in Washington, D.C. More about that a little later. You might be interested to know that Ann is an axe-throwing, #BadAxe, best-selling author of multiple books, including Everybody Writes and Content Rules, co-authored with C.C. Chapman. And those books have been translated into 19 different languages. Suffice it to say, Ann has been an instrumental person, an inspirational person to marketers all over the world. Now, you might think I'm done, but I'm not. There's still more. She is an E.B. White superfan, the proud caretaker of an impressive Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Abby. Hi, Abby. Tiny house office owner, where she is now. And one of my favorite things about Ann is she is the wearer of amazing pants during her many keynote presentations around the world. Truly, Ann's pants game is first class. Welcome, Ann. How's it going?
You were not kidding when you said, just sit tight. Just sit tight for the introduction. And wow, thank you. That was very generous and hard to sit through with a straight face, but thank you.
It's all true. It's all true. So here's some trivia. I don't know if you knew this, but we have actually known each other for over 12 years. I checked on LinkedIn and we had connected in April of 2007, actually. I think.
Wow, really?
That's makes us 1,000 years old in internet time.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to remember how we first connected. I'm
through the website, I think, or something, as you do.
As you do.
Over the years, you've taught me a lot, and including that there's a marketing metaphor in just about everything. And in my case, my thing lately is marketing and fitness, but with you recently, it's about marketing and throwing axes. So, especially with your last edition of your newsletter, I'm curious if you can share a little more about that.
Yeah. So in Toronto for an event, went axe throwing with a bunch of other speakers and attendees at the event. And the obvious analogy would be that in marketing, it's all about hitting the target. But I actually think it's a much richer analogy than that. And so the analogy that I drew, I guess, or where I see marketing and writing reflected in axe throwing is that sometimes it's just enough to hit the target. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of, courage, I guess, to stand up there and actually try something. And I think that's probably why in B2B marketing, it's so much safer to not throw the axe, to instead just sort of sit behind and do what you've always done. And so the analogy that I saw really was, some days it's just enough to hit the target, and that it is scary and it's dangerous and it can feel uncomfortable to try new things. But I think it's incumbent on all of us in B2B marketing, whether you are a writer or a marketer or whatever role you play in an organization, to take some risks and just get in the box and throw an axe at that target.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Now, I think you can agree that there's a cornucopia of content types that B2B marketers have to choose from, right? And I think we all know, as seasoned marketers, ultimately it really comes down to what makes sense for the customer, what formats make sense for what the buyer actually wants. But there are trends that go up and down relative to content types. And I'd love to start things off by playing a game with you, sort of a hot or not word association sort of game, where I'm going to mention content types. And I'd like to hear from you whether you'd like to see more or less of that particular type.
Okay.
So, cool. Starting off, social network updates.
Probably less. Well, this is hard though. This is hard because
there's a lot of it depends, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. It depends, because how relevant is it?
We have to pick.
Yeah. All right, fine. We're just going to play it straight then.
Okay.
Let's pretend that I'm putting an asterisk next to every single one of these tactics and saying it depends on your audience and it depends on your organization.
Okay,
Go.
we'll do a blog post about that later as a
Big
follow-up.
disclaimer over everything.
Okay, so blog post.
Let's see, less.
White papers.
Unless they're interactive, less.
Ebooks.
Same. I'd say less.
Infographics.
I actually quite like infographics. I don't see enough good ones, so I'm going to go with more.
Original research.
Definitely more, whether you ultimately publish it or not. Now I'm just editorializing behind the scenes, but that's okay.
Newsletters.
Oh, definitely more, but well done.
Webinars.
Let me think about that for a second. I guess, my gosh. This is a tough one. Can we just call it a draw?
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know that was an option. I would have maybe done that more at the beginning.
Because it's you. Okay. Podcasts.
Oh, well, we're seeing so many podcasts now. So I think more. I think we have room to grow. Video. More.
Interactive.
Definitely more.
AR and VR.
So buzzwordy. I'm gonna say less because I don't think we figured out how to do it well.
And last, conference presentation content. Loaded question, isn't it?
Yes, it is. More, but again, only if it's done incredibly well.
Done well. Well, it's also a great segue to my next question, because speaking of conferences, B2B Forum's coming up October 16th through 18th in Washington, D.C.
Woohoo!
And I'm curious, what excites you most about this year's B2B Forum?
Oh boy, so much great stuff happening. One of the things that I think sets the B2B Forum apart, and you know this, Lee, because you've been part of this as well, is that we really look at the whole marketer. It's not just about leveling up your career, but it's also about making connections with other marketers there that you can rely on throughout the year. We have so many people who come back year after year after year, and who just say, like, I found my besties, I found my squad, I found people who are just like me at B2B. But the other thing that I really love about the B2B Forum is that, when I say that we feed the whole marketer, is that we also think about the, we look at what makes you happy, in your job. How can you be more fulfilled? How can you take risks in your job that actually make sense for you and your organization? And so I think what we try to do there isn't just say, all right, this is what's new in B2B and these are the tactics you need to know and here are the trends and so on. Like, yeah, that's all there. But you can go to any conference for that. The thing that sets us apart is that we connect you to other people so that you're able to execute throughout the year. And also we encourage you to think about your life balance a little bit more. That's why we have sessions on mindfulness and yoga. That's why we have a fun run and a photo walk, because I think all of those things, they might seem like sort of fluffy, but they're part of our lives. And I think it's really important for us to approach our jobs, not just as robots, but really as whole people, and to show up as, as your whole self, as your full self. You've got to feed so many aspects of yourself.
Well, that holistic view is definitely ambitious and something B2B Forum delivers on. And it's one of the reasons I know I keep coming back every year. So awesome.
It's no accident that in the 12 years that I've known you, suddenly now you're Mr. Fitness. Look at you. You're like Mr. Incredible now. And I think B2B Forum has played a small part.
Instrumental. Absolutely a catalyst for change and personal growth. Thank you.
No, it's so funny because not to hijack this conversation just about that, but okay. So I was on LinkedIn the other day, and do you know Ethan Butte? He has a podcast, and he was doing a podcast with somebody and he asked for like a shout out, like who's somebody who's been, instrumental in your career. And she credited me, but really it was more about the B2B Forum. And she's been there last year, maybe the previous year. And she said it's the place where she felt like she met her people. She felt like she met her community, and that we gave her permission to do things a little differently. And so like that was very gratifying to me, because it's not just our view of the world. I feel like it actually resonates with people. And so that makes me like very happy. And I feel so happy that she connected with that whole vibe.
Yeah, it's not just a mechanical transactional event, it's meaningful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We try. Yeah.
Well, and it's not always been that way, maybe. I mean, maybe it has, but it's evolved over the years. B2B Forum has as a conference. And I'm wondering, what do you think's driven the change that's happened, and what is the focus for this year? Is there a particular theme or focus for this year?
Yeah, so this year we've yes, I mean there's a theme every year, and so. But I think just the first part of your question is just the evolution of the event. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with how I saw the industry evolving and how we at MarketingProfs really saw the industry evolving. And it's, so taking a look at being more strategic, not only in your job, but also in your career. So that's kind of what the backbone of the event has been, but also to provide a really great experience, so we talk a lot about experience in marketing, and what does that actually mean? We try to live it at the B2B Forum, because I want people to feel, whether they're watching somebody on stage, whether they're sitting in a session room, or whether they're on the event floor, that this is a not your typical event, right? That this sort of feels different. I want it to feel different throughout, no matter where you are and no matter what your access point is and where you are in your career. So focusing on experience, number one, and then focusing on just, sort of the whole marketer. That's kind of the backbone of what we try to do there.
Yeah, it's not your typical event could be a tagline, because the attention to detail, including the signage in rooms to all these other wonderful, interesting touches, really make for an amazing experience.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, thank you. I mean, I get a lot of credit for it, but I tell you, it's the events team is, like, I call them the Navy SEALs of marketing, because they are just so good. They're so on it, and they're so amazing. So, and most of them are completely behind the scenes, unless you are, in one particular, like, unless you're a speaker, then you don't know Julie necessarily, Julie Pildner, right, who handles all this.
Julie's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And so there's so many people behind the scenes, and, I'm sort of the front person and get all the credit, but man, compared to what they do, I sort of just show up, so they're fantastic.
Your accordion, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're fantastic.
So speaking of front people, B2B Forum has a great lineup of keynote speakers this year, including Dean James, Jay Bear, Kara Swisher, big win. I'm wondering, is there a connective tissue between those keynotes, and what should people be looking forward to with the keynotes?
Yeah, so every year, the 3 or 4 keynotes that we have this year, we have 3, they sort of fall into general buckets. One is typically somebody who is solidly B2B, who really can give great marketing advice, who can ground all the things that are happening, all the programming in a solid B2B message. And this year that's Jay. So people may have read his Talk Triggers book. This year at the B2B Forum, he's going to go deep into, B2B examples of that, right? How do we actually activate talk triggers in a B2B environment? It's going to be fantastic. He's got tons of new examples, and it just has a really interesting spin on how to be talk worthy in B2B marketing. So that's fantastic. We also have Neen James, who is she's not really on the marketing circuit per se, but she talks a lot about attention, that we're told to pay attention all the time, but really it's about earning attention, and how do we do that as marketers. So she works across the organization, not just in marketing. She's going to be talking to marketers, and of course she's going to tailor her message to us. But the reason why I like Neen, and why I also try to have somebody who's sort of outside of marketing, who could maybe take that message and say, okay, here's how marketing can lead something throughout the organization. So that's kind of the second kind of bucket, I guess. And then this year we have Kara Swisher, not a marketer, but has a fantastic podcast, really active on social media, really strong voice. And so she's somebody who I wanted because I love her broader perspective, so putting all of what she's the closing keynote, all of what we just learned over the past 2 days by the time we're there on October 18th, and putting it into a context for how we all live in the world. So those are sort of the 3 general buckets that
Okay.
I try to look at every year. And yeah, they're all so strong and they're such great speakers that,
Yeah.
this is going to be a real killer keynote lineup. I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I've always thought of you as one of the few tier one marketing thought leaders that still walks the talk when it comes to the craft of marketing.
Thanks.
And I'm wondering what some of the major trends that you're seeing relative to B2B that are happening going, into 2020.
Mm.
Just a week or
Um,
two.
yeah, I mean, I've been all in on this for a while, but it's so old school, but email newsletters are just have made such a comeback, and I've been a champion for this idea since, last year. I spent a lot of time last year at events talking about email newsletters, and to some degree this year too. I think it's so many brands are really missing the opportunity with email. They're so focused on trying to get really great at voice activated applications. What's our Alexa strategy? It's like, why do you have an Alexa strategy? Why are you even thinking about that when your email newsletter really needs help over here? So I think there's a tendency in marketing, and I get it. I do the same thing, is like to think about what's new, what's next, what can we do over here? We got to be on the forefront here, where I think it's more important to serve the people who you already have in your world, right? Serve those people really well. And so the email newsletter, I think, is it's vastly undervalued. I talked about this last year, but we focus on the news. We think about what we want to say. We think about our email newsletter as a distribution strategy, when we should be focusing on the second part of that word, which is the letter. How are we going to communicate with one person? How are we going to respect that opportunity to reach them directly in that intimate space of their inbox? It's just, we 97% of B2B marketers have some sort of email program. Many of those are email newsletters, but yet when we asked B2B marketers, what are your top ways to nurture your customers? Email newsletters aren't even on the list. Well, then what are we doing there? What's your strategy? And so when I look at that kind of stuff, I say, come on, guys, we got to step up our game with email. So that's one of the things.
Okay.
The other thing, and I know where you're like, okay, I got that, Ann. You just went on for about 5 minutes, and I said, make it quick. The other thing is, I do think that voice technology is pretty interesting. I think we're at the very, very early stages, but I feel like that's something that I'm watching and kind of, looking at right now, not ready to move into, but I do think it's super interesting.
Well, definitely in terms of, making sure information is accessible in the way that buyers are accustomed. And with the consumerization of B2B really starting to permeate and set expectations, as voice grows in consumer interactions, it's certainly going to grow in B2B in some way.
Yeah.
A few years ago, you asked me to share a quote for an article that you were writing, and your feedback to my contribution was a learning moment for me. It really struck home.
Really?
That has helped to improve all of my writing since. And that was the value of brevity and quality.
Really?
Yeah. I gave you, I think you were asking for something about this big, and I gave you something that was just ridiculous. And you were really nice about your feedback. And I appreciate that lesson, though, because it really has helped me optimize, so to speak, being concise, succinct, but effective at the same time. So my question actually is, what is your prescription for B2B marketers when it comes to, marketers that are over-relying on quantity, and your prescription for them to explore and realize the value of brevity and being more specific and succinct and effective in their content?
Yeah. So that's funny, actually. It's funny how small things, that some interaction with somebody sticks with you over time. That's happened to me so many times. And thank you for that. That's nice to know that I've impacted you in any positive way. So I guess in terms of when I think about this prescription for that, I like brevity, but I also like clarity, and I like value, right? So those are the three sort of pillars of content worthiness, I guess, that I always look at. Because I think sometimes if we over-index on any one of those things, if we think, oh, that this has to be brief, well, that means that we get into that horrible swamp that I call snackable, right? I hate that. I hate that word. I hate hearing marketers say that. It's not about being as short and snackable as you can. I think it's instead it's about how do you actually create value? How do you create clarity? And so so that's kind of my formula that I think about. And this isn't just advice that I give to other marketers, but it's the same construct that I apply to my own work. So is this clear? Is this brief? And does it have value? And is it inspired in some way too? And I think there's a whole lot of ways you can think about sprinkling a little bit of inspiration into what you're working on. But I want it to always feel like it's coming only from me, and it could only come from me. And that if you covered up the byline on something that I wrote, and if you covered up the byline on something that you, Lee, wrote, then we wouldn't sound the same, So that's where a little bit of the inspiration, that's where your voice comes into.
Some special sauce, for sure. With your popularity, you must get inundated with questions like today. And I'm curious what some of the common content marketing problems are that you get asked about.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, let me think about this for a second. People ask me a lot about writing, and here's kind of the funny thing about when people ask me questions about writing. It's usually preceded by the apology that, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous writing to you because I'm worried about grammar. And that's sort of the problem right there. It's I don't care about grammar necessarily. Yeah, you want to sort of know the grammar rules more generally, but you can always get some, you can always fix that later, fix it in post, right? And so I don't think about great writing as the same as great grammar. They're very different things. And so typically when someone expresses some anxiety right off that, I feel so awkward writing to you because I'm so worried it's going to have a mistake. Number one, just let go of that judgment. That's like the axe throwing analogy again, just stand in the pit and throw the axe, don't worry about it. And so, yeah, so I get asked a lot about that. I get asked a lot about actually some of the questions you asked me here today. I get a lot too, like, what am I paying attention to? What's next in B2B? Yeah, those are the kind of things that I think marketers struggle with.
Great. I'm going to not ask the next question. In your presentations, you always give some fresh examples of brands that are doing it right when it comes to content. And I'm curious if there are any new examples of awesome B2B content or experiences that you're aware of that you could share.
Yeah. So, one that comes to mind immediately is my friend Brian Smith. He works at Tenon. I think actually they're right there in Minneapolis, aren't they? Tenon is the company that I think of them as the Zamboni for floors in shopping centers or malls, right? Okay. It's kind of the ride-on floor cleaner. You've seen guys riding around on them. Yeah. So they're not actual Zambonis, but they clean the floor, and they sort of remind me of those. And so that's what Tenon sells. They have a whole fleet of vehicles and cleaning solutions. They're completely B2B. And he works in marketing. He's on the marketing team. Marketing was constantly letting sales know what they were doing to support them. They were offering them assets, content assets. Here's what's going on. Here's all the different things that we're creating for you to make your jobs that much easier when you got into the field and you're selling. But they realized that sales was not reading their material. They weren't reading the information. And so they created an internal podcast that is 17, 18 minutes long, the average commute time for the sales team when they're going from their homes to the office, so that they could listen. And it's a monthly podcast in which they straight up just tell sales what's what. And I thought this was so ingenious, not only because of the fact of, sort of that hole that it fits, but also because it's stepping back and saying, okay, this isn't working. Maybe it's not that we're not doing our jobs right. Maybe we're just not communicating it well. And so I love that approach. Is just, I talk about slowing down all the time too, in B2B marketing, saying, okay, should we just keep doing this? There is a tendency in marketing to keep ticking off the boxes, right? Well, this is what we always do. We're doing this. So what does sales have to complain about? Well, if it's not breaking through, let's step back and say what might help change that, right? How do we actually fill this need a little bit better? So they created the podcast. So I love that. But the other reason why I really like it is because I listened to a few episodes of it, and it's really fun. And I don't work at Tenon, and I don't really care about what they're talking about, but they have this whole section in there on dad jokes. Just like it's rapid fire dad jokes, and it's awesome. It's just so much fun, and you can really feel the energy and just these two guys, Brian and a colleague. It's just a fantastic example, I think, of thinking through the problem that you have and finding a really creative content solution to it, and just making it happen and doing it with some sense of fun and personality. So I think a lot of external marketing could take some lessons from that as well.
That's interesting. We're seeing a lot more internal marketing initiatives also like that, where external marketing tactics or best practices or whatever are being used internally to champion programs, especially I think with large enterprise organizations where you have very large populations to reach or whatever. But it's interesting how much more of that we're actually seeing.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So in your newsletter, it's just right in the last year or more. And of course, you've had a newsletter longer than that. So I'm wondering what changes did you, and I think you've written about this, talked about this, but remind everyone listening in, viewing, what is it that you've done in the last 12 months, 18 months or so to trigger this explosion and awesome?
So I relaunched my personal newsletter, Total Anarchy, about a year and a half ago. And I started with 3,000-ish, something like that, readers. I'm almost at 20,000. So a year and a half later. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at the stats to figure out, is that a good growth? But I'm happy with it. I had a newsletter kind of, but it was kind of it wasn't a real newsletter. It was basically every time I published a new blog post, it would just be auto-generated as a news alert. So it wasn't really a newsletter. So this current iteration, is actually the first time that I've really done this since I was a kid, really, and just used to write out a newsletter on my dad's typewriter sitting down in his office at my house. And so I don't know, I love it. And I wanted to do something, the reason why I did it is because I wanted to do something that was just mine. I mean, obviously MarketingProfs has a newsletter, MarketingProfs has tons of content. But the thing is, the further you get along in your career, the less you actually touch things and the less you actually own things completely. And I just wanted that again, and I think it's important it was important for me as a creative, but I also think it's important for marketers because it's reminded me to, just of all the things that you have, that when you touch something and when you take ownership of something, it's just a very different experience from a marketing standpoint. And it's just taught me a lot, about the state of modern marketing and what it actually takes to succeed. So it's one thing to say, oh, marketers should be doing email newsletters. And if I could pontificate that, sure. But you know what? I'm in it. I know what's worked. I've studied this over the past year and a half. And so I feel much more informed and I have a lot more credibility as a result. I love doing it. I love my job, but I love doing that probably more than anything else. And it's a lot of work. I do it on the weekends, but it's just, I don't know. I really love it. I love the connection to the audience. And I love when I write, I ask them, why did you sign up? What did you hope to learn here? They write to me. And when I always write them back, or I try to. I think I'm at 99% of the time I do. And they're always like, whoa, you answered. And it's isn't that kind of sad that that's our reaction? That we don't expect people to respond when you ask them a question. It's so just stuff like that. It's just been a great learning experience.
So MarketingProfs has such a strong community. And I'm wondering if you feel like B2B brands need to focus on developing a community that isn't, somewhere where they're directly trying to sell to.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do have communities, whether we think about it in those terms or not. We've got our customers, we've got potential customers, our prospects, we've got fans and ambassadors. We have all those people, whether we call them that or not. And so I guess, do we codify it in terms of a community, and do we actually nurture it like
Right.
that? Yeah, I think we should. You know, I
Yeah.
think our community is so much, it's so much bigger than I think we realize. You know, if you really think about who is it that we sell to, and what is the audiences of all those people, then I think you already probably do have a community. It's just a matter of how are you activating it.
Okay, great. Well, this has been fantastic. I have just one more question for you.
Yeah.
Are there any special projects, events, or people you'd like to shout out to?
Oh man, well, since we've talked so much about the B2B Marketing Forum, if you are not registered, you should totally come to the B2B Marketing Forum. I'm sure that Lee could hook you up with a discount code. It's October 16th through 18th in National Harbor, just outside of Washington, D.C. And it's a beautiful venue, by the way. And have you been to National Harbor before?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, it's so
Resort?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the Gaylord, where it's the resort where the event is taking place. It's just fantastic. It's right on the water. There's just, there's a water shuttle you can take over to Alexandria, Virginia, if you want to explore that area. Anyway, I was there for a planning meeting, and we were just sort of geeking out at just how beautiful and how awesome it was. You will appreciate, there's a running path right along the river.
Yay!
Right over to an Air Force One, an old Air Force One, I think belonged to George W. Bush, that's just parked down the river. It's cool. It's just like a really cool kind of place to hang out. So there's that. So you should absolutely join us.
All right. Well, sounds good. So you heard it here, everyone. You must see Ann at MarketingProfs B2B Forum it's between October 16th and 18th in Washington, D.C. at the Gaylord National Resort. So this is a must-attend event. I get to go to many B2B events throughout the year. And as Ann talked about, this is a holistic type of conference, meaning that you're going to get the practical knowledge, you're going to get inspired, but you're also going to connect with peers and find your people and develop relationships that will last far beyond the few days of fun you have in DC. So I highly recommend you checking that out, and also subscribing to Ann's newsletter. There's so much information and inspiration in her newsletter. It's definitely something you've got to check out. So thank you very much for your time, Ann.